I was supposed to be happy. 2 months before the wedding, the hardest decision I should have been making was whether to go with the classic black tux or the navy one Emily liked. Instead, I was standing in my own hallway at 2 in the morning, listening to my fiancée whisper sweet little lies into her phone. I wasn't supposed to hear it. She thought I was asleep. "I miss you too, baby." Her voice was soft, warm. The way she used to talk to me. I pressed my back against the wall, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Don't worry. He has no idea. I'll tell him after the wedding." My stomach turned. Tell me what? That she was screwing someone else? That she was planning to marry me and keep another man on the side? Or worse, was she planning to leave me after? I could hear her smile in the next words. "I just don't want to ruin everything now. Too much has been planned. And it's not like I don't love him, I do. It's just different with you." Something inside me cracked. The last 3 years flashed through my mind. The nights we stayed up talking about our future. The way she'd look at me across the room and smirk like I was the only man in the world. The mornings she'd wake up first and trace circles on my chest, whispering about how she couldn't wait to be my wife. Lies. Every single moment, tainted. I should have barged in right then, ripped the phone from her hand, demanded to know who the hell she was talking to. But I didn't. I turned, went back to our bedroom, and climbed into bed like nothing had happened. Because I needed proof. The next day, I started watching her. Every little thing. The way she'd smile at her phone, the way she'd leave the room when a call came in, the way she'd say, "work meeting," but come back home with her hair slightly different, like she'd fixed it in a hurry. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. And then, 3 nights later, I followed her. She had told me she was meeting her bridesmaids to finalize dress fittings. Kissed me goodbye even. Told me not to wait up. I waited 5 minutes, then grabbed my keys and left. She wasn't at the boutique. She was at a hotel. I sat in my car across the street, watching as she stepped out of her car and smoothed down her dress. My breath felt like fire in my throat. And then my brother got out of the elevator to meet her. My brother. She smiled at him, her whole face lighting up, and he put a hand on her stomach. And she let him. My hands clenched around the steering wheel so hard I thought I'd snap it in half. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was pregnant. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. Emily. My fiancée. The woman I had planned to spend the rest of my life with, standing there, in front of a goddamn hotel, letting my brother touch her stomach like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like they had shared something intimate. Like this wasn't the first time. Like he had a right. My brother, Jason. The guy who used to steal my video games as a kid. The guy who broke my arm when we were 12 because we got too rough wrestling in the backyard. The guy who stood beside me just last month. Patting my back. Laughing about how I was finally going to settle down. I watched as they spoke, too far away to hear, but it didn't matter. The way she looked at him told me everything. I used to think I was the only one who got that smile. The one that made me feel like I was the luckiest man in the world. But she had been giving it to him too. Maybe for weeks, maybe for months. And then Jason leaned in, kissed her, and she kissed him back. I was out of the car before I even realized what I was doing. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was just moving. By the time they even noticed me, I was already there, already swinging. My fist connected with Jason's face. A sickening crack splitting the air. He stumbled back, clutching his nose, blood immediately pouring through his fingers. Emily gasped, grabbing his arm like he was the victim here. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she shrieked. "What's wrong with me?" I stared at her, my whole body shaking. "Are you kidding me right now?" I barked. "You're asking me that? You." Jason groaned, his hand still on his face. "Jesus, man," I turned on him. Don't even open your goddamn mouth." He had the audacity to look offended. Like I had no right to be mad. Emily stepped in front of him, her eyes wild. "I can explain." "Oh, you can explain? Great. I'd love to hear this one, Emily. What part do you want to explain first? The fact that you're screwing my brother? The fact that you were planning to marry me anyway? Or how about the fact that you're pregnant with his kid?" Her eyes widened, and for the first time I saw panic. Save it. I shook my head. Just save it. Because I realized something then. Something that hit me harder than any punch could. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't crying. She wasn't breaking down. She wasn't begging for forgiveness. She was angry. She was pissed that she got caught. Jason, my own brother, was just standing there, barely even trying to defend himself. Like he thought I'd just get over it. Like I'd just accept this. I exhaled sharply, stepping back, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. "You're dead to me," I said, voice eerily calm. "Both of you." Emily's jaw clenched. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic. I let out a bitter laugh. You don't get to call me dramatic. You lied to me. You planned to marry me while carrying his kid. You were never gonna tell me. Were you? She didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. I nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in my throat. We're done, I said, and I swear to God, if either of you ever try to speak to me again. Jason scoffed. Oh, come on, man. I punched him again, harder. This time he stayed down. I turned on my heel and walked away. I didn't look back. I don't remember driving home. 1 second I was standing over Jason, watching blood drip between his fingers, and the next I was in my apartment, staring at the engagement ring on the kitchen counter. Her ring. The one I had saved up for. The one I had agonized over, wanting it to be perfect. The one I had slipped onto her finger the night I proposed, shaking with nerves, thinking I had just won the lottery of life. Now it was just a worthless piece of metal. My phone was vibrating nonstop, filling the silent room with its pathetic little buzz. I didn't need to check to know who it was. Emily. Jason. Maybe even my parents, because of course she would have called them. I could already hear her voice, twisting the story into something that made her look like the victim. I grabbed the phone and shut it off. I needed silence. I needed to think. But thinking led me right back to that hotel. Right back to the way she smiled at him. Right back to the way he touched her like it was his right. My own brother. I sat down hard, gripping the edge of the counter. My whole body felt tight, coiled, like if I didn't focus on keeping myself still, I'd snap in half. Had it been going on the whole time? Was I just some blind idiot, playing the fool while they laughed behind my back? I thought back to all the times Jason had come over, cracking jokes about married life, ruffling my hair like I was still 12 years old. The times Emily had disappeared for hours with some excuse, kissing me on the cheek like she wasn't lying through her teeth. I felt sick. Then, a knock. I ignored it. Came again, louder. Open up. A familiar voice. Dad. I clenched my jaw. Of course. I should have known he'd be the first one to show up. I stood up and yanked the door open. He was standing there in his stupid golf jacket, looking at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. You hit your brother. I exhaled sharply, gripping the doorframe so I wouldn't do something I'd regret. Yeah, Dad. I did. Twice. Should have been 3 times. Dad sighed, stepping inside without asking. He looked around like he had never seen the place before, like the mess. My mess was somehow more offensive than what his golden boy had done. I talked to Jason, he started. I laughed. Of course you did. He's a wreck, son. Oh, is he a wreck? I repeated, my voice rising. I must have missed that part when he was grinning while my fiancée. I choked on the word, shaking my head. You know what? Never mind. Just get to the part where you tell me to get over it and be the bigger man. Dad's mouth twitched, which meant I was right. I took a step back. You're actually here to defend them. Oh, okay. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. So what is it? What's the excuse? He just couldn't help himself? It was a mistake? They didn't mean to hurt me? Dad hesitated. Then, she's pregnant. I stared at him. No shit. She's keeping the baby, son. My stomach twisted. I had known it, obviously, but hearing it out loud, hearing him say it like it was some kind of argument, made me want to punch something all over again. Congratulations, I said flatly. Your first grandkid is coming from an affair. Dad's eyes darkened. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. He exhaled slowly. Look, what they did was wrong. But they're still family. You can't just cut them off like this. Watch me. They love you. I barked out a laugh. Love me? Love me? That's funny. That's really, really funny. Because I seem to remember love being the thing that keeps people from betraying each other. Guess they missed that memo. Dad was quiet. I stepped forward, voice dropping. Tell Jason I don't have a brother anymore. Tell Emily she can go to hell. And tell Mom, because I know she's going to call, that if either of you keep pushing me on this, you won't have a son either. Dad's expression tightened. You don't mean that. I do. For the first time in my life, I watched my father, the man who always had something to say, struggle for words. I waited. When nothing came, I opened the door. Goodbye, Dad. He looked at me for a long moment. Then, with a sharp nod, he walked out. I closed the door behind him. And for the first time that night, I felt free. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My entire world had just imploded. My fiancée was carrying my brother's child. My family expected me to just get over it. And my father had stood in my apartment looking me in the eye and asked me to forgive them. Forgive them. Like I could ever forget the way Emily looked at Jason. Like I could erase the feeling of my fist connecting with my brother's face, the sick satisfaction of hearing his nose break under the weight of my fury. Like I could unhear every lie she had ever told me. No, I wasn't forgiving anyone. The silence in my apartment was suffocating. Every object, every piece of furniture felt like it had been touched by them. The framed photos on the wall. One of them was still of us, taken last Christmas when I thought I was happy. The couch where she used to curl up with me. The kitchen counter where she used to sit, swinging her legs, talking about our future. Lies. All of it. I couldn't stay here. By 6 a.m, I had made up my mind. I was leaving. I wasn't going to sit around in this place, breathing in the ghosts of a life that had never been real. I wasn't going to keep walking past the wedding invitations stacked on my desk like some cruel joke. I wasn't going to wait for the next inevitable call from my mother, telling me to be reasonable. Screw reasonable. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started shoving clothes into it. I didn't care about folding, didn't care about packing neatly. I just needed out. My mind was a storm of thoughts, but at the center of it was one, burning and absolute: I refused to be a part of this circus. Halfway through throwing things into my bag, my phone started buzzing again. I glanced at the screen. Mom. Of course. I let it ring. Then ring again. Then again. When she called for the 4th time in a row, I finally picked up because if I didn't, she'd probably show up at my door. What? Oh, thank God, she breathed. I've been trying to reach you all night. Your father told me what happened. I zipped my bag with one hand. Then there's nothing to talk about. Sweetheart, I know you're upset. I let out a sharp laugh. Oh, do you? You know I'm upset? Wow. You must be a mind reader. She sighed. Listen, I'm not saying what they did was okay, but I cut her off. But what, Mom? What possible excuse do you have lined up for them? What magical explanation is going to make me say, oh, never mind. I'll just pretend my fiancé and my brother didn't stab me in the back. She paused. Emily is pregnant. I clenched my jaw. Yeah, I know. She's scared, honey. She didn't know how to tell you. I gripped the phone tighter. She didn't know how to tell me? That's rich, considering she wasn't planning to tell me. I overheard her on the phone. Mom. She was going to marry me and keep this a secret. Mom hesitated, and for a second I hoped, that maybe, just maybe, she'd see my side. But then she spoke. She made a mistake. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. A mistake, I repeated. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. A mistake is backing into a parked car. What she did wasn't a mistake, Mom. It was planned. She knew exactly what she was doing. Mom sighed heavily. She's family now, whether you like it or not. That baby is going to be your niece or nephew. You can't just run from this. I exhaled sharply. Watch me. Honey, please. No, my voice came out cold. If you want to keep them in your life, go ahead. But I'm done. With all of you. A long silence. Then softer. You don't mean that. I closed my eyes. I do. She didn't try to argue again. Maybe she finally realized I was serious. Maybe she thought if she gave me space, I'd come around. She had no idea. I have to go, I said. Don't call me again. I hung up before she could say another word. Then, without another glance at the apartment that had once been my home, I grabbed my bag, walked out, and slammed the door shut behind me. The silence after my father left was suffocating. I stood there, staring at the closed door, half expecting him to knock again, to try one more time to fix the mess his golden son had created. But he didn't. Good. I needed space. I needed to breathe. I turned back to my apartment, but suddenly it felt small. The walls felt like they were closing in, and every piece of furniture, every framed photo, every little thing Emily had touched or picked out felt like it was mocking me. The engagement ring was still on the counter where I had left it. I grabbed it, holding it up to the light. It was funny how something so small could carry so much weight. I should have thrown it out. I should have flushed it down the toilet, pawned it, set it on fire. But instead, I clenched my fist around it and shoved it into my pocket. I needed to get out of there. I grabbed my keys and left. The drive was a blur. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay in that apartment another second. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I replayed the night over and over in my head. Emily. Jason. My brother. The way they looked at each other, the way they stood so comfortable together, like I had never even existed between them. The way my dad had tried to smooth it all over, like I was being unreasonable. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. I ended up at a bar. Not one of those sleek, modern places where couples sip overpriced cocktails and pretend their marriages are perfect. No, this was the kind of place where people came to forget. Dim lights, old wood, the faint smell of spilled beer soaked into the floorboards. Exactly what I needed. I took a seat at the counter and ordered a whiskey. No ice, no bullshit. The bartender slid it over without a word. I took a sip, letting the burn settle in my chest. And then, as if the universe just had to kick me when I was down, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, expecting another missed call from Emily, another message from my mother telling me to be reasonable. But it wasn't either of them. It was Jason. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. The audacity. I slammed my drink back and ordered another. I wasn't going to respond. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a reply. But then, another text. I never meant for it to happen like this. Like this? Like this? My blood boiled. I wanted to throw the phone across the bar. Instead, I gritted my teeth and typed back. Then how the hell did you mean for it to happen? The dots appeared. He was typing. Then, I don't know, man. It was never supposed to go this far. I let out a harsh laugh, shaking my head. That was it? That was his big excuse? I typed back, go to hell, Jason. And then I blocked his number. For the first time all night, I felt something like peace. Until I looked up and saw Emily walking into the bar. She saw me before I had a chance to react. Her eyes locked onto mine, and just like that, the whole bar, the noise, the dim lights, the conversations humming around me, faded into the background. For a split second, I thought about getting up and walking out, just leaving, not giving her the satisfaction of a single word. But then I remembered Jason's text, the way my father had tried to smooth it all over like I was some stubborn child throwing a tantrum. No, she wasn't getting away that easily. Emily crossed the room, weaving between tables like she belonged here, like she had any right to stand in front of me after what she had done. She wasn't dressed up, no makeup, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail. It wasn't the Emily I had proposed to. No, this was the Emily who had gotten caught. She slid into the seat next to me at the bar like nothing had happened. Like this was normal. We need to talk, she said. I let out a sharp laugh, shaking my head. No, you need to talk. I don't need a damn thing from you. She exhaled, her fingers gripping the edge of the bar. I know you're angry. Oh, do you? I cut in. You know I'm angry? Wow, what gave it away, Emily? The fact that I punched my own brother? Or maybe the fact that I told my entire family to go to hell? Her jaw tightened. Can you just please let me explain? I turned to her, finally looking her in the eye. Explain what? My voice was cold, sharp. Explain how you planned to marry me while carrying his kid? Explain how you stood there, smiling at me, promising forever while sneaking off to screw him. Emily flinched, but I didn't care. She deserved worse. Her lips parted, but for once she didn't have the perfect excuse ready. Nothing? I said, leaning back. That's what I thought. She inhaled sharply, pressing her palms against the bar. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I barked out a laugh. Jesus Christ, you sound just like Jason. Her eyes flickered with something guilt, maybe? Maybe not. I didn't care anymore. I picked up my drink and took a slow sip, watching her squirm. You want to know the worst part? I asked, setting my glass down with a thud. It's not even the cheating. It's not the lying. It's not even the fact that you slept with him, of all people. I leaned in just enough that she had to look at me. It's the fact that you never planned to tell me. You were going to marry me and keep this dirty little secret for the rest of your life. Her throat bobbed, but still no words. I shook my head. Were you ever planning to leave him? Or was I just the safe choice? The guy with the ring, the house, the stability? Were you just planning to live this sick little double life forever? Emily swallowed hard. I loved you. I slammed my fist down on the bar, making her jump. Loved me? I hissed. Don't you dare say that to me. Her eyes were glassy now, but I wasn't buying it. If she thought she could squeeze out a few tears and make me second-guess myself, she was dead wrong. I exhaled slowly, forcing my voice steady. You're pregnant with his kid, Emily. That's not some whoops mistake. That's not one thing led to another. That's months of lying. Months of knowing exactly what you were doing and choosing to do it anyway. She bit her lip, looking away. I didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed again. But this time it was hollow, empty. That's the difference between us, I said quietly. I would have never hurt you. Not in a million years. But you didn't just hurt me. You destroyed me. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, like she was bracing herself. Then finally she spoke. I wanted to tell you. I stared at her. Bullshit. She flinched but kept going. I did, I swear. But then I found out I was pregnant. And I didn't know how. She let out a shaky breath. I thought maybe if I married you, if I just moved on, I could fix it. I could make it right. I felt something sharp and bitter rise in my chest. Fix it, I repeated. You thought marrying me would fix it? Her eyes met mine, desperate now. I still love you. Something inside me snapped. I stood up so fast my stool scraped against the floor. No, you don't. She blinked, taken aback. You don't get to say that, I said, voice low and firm. You don't get to cheat, lie, betray me in the worst possible way and then sit here and say you love me. I shook my head. You love the idea of me. You love the safety net. You love the man who would have done anything for you. I grabbed my wallet and threw a few bills on the counter. But that man is gone. Emily reached for my arm, but I pulled away. Don't ever contact me again, I said. Don't text me, don't call, don't send my parents to do your dirty work. I met her eyes one last time. You made your choice. Now live with it. And with that, I walked out. This time, I didn't look back. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. For a second, I didn't know where I was. The room was dark, unfamiliar, the air heavy with the stale scent of old fabric and cheap air freshener. Then it hit me, I was in a motel. Not my apartment. Not the home I had built with Emily. A nowhere place. Because that's exactly where I was now, nowhere. I let out a slow breath and reached for my phone, squinting at the screen. 13 missed calls. Mom. Jason. Dad. And, of course, Emily. I didn't bother reading the texts. I already knew what they would say. Excuses. Justifications. Maybe even a few guilt trips disguised as concern. I blocked every single number. Then I sat up, rubbing my face, feeling the weight of everything settle onto my shoulders like a pile of bricks. What now? I had spent the last few days running from my apartment, from my family, from the wreckage Emily and Jason had left behind. I had driven until the city faded in my rearview mirror, until I found some hole-in-the-wall motel on the edge of nowhere and handed over my credit card like I wasn't a man whose entire life had just gone up in flames. But now, sitting in the dim light of a flickering motel lamp, reality came crashing back in. I had no plan. No direction. No idea what the hell came next. I dragged myself out of bed and stumbled toward the tiny bathroom, flipping on the light. The man in the mirror barely looked like me. Dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. I turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on my face. Get it together. I had spent the last few days drowning in anger, letting it consume me, but where had that gotten me? Emily didn't care. Jason sure as hell didn't. And my parents? They had already made their choice. I was the only one left clinging to something that had already been burned to the ground. It was time to let go. I grabbed my phone again, scrolling through my contacts. Most of the names meant nothing to me now. Family members I wouldn't call, people tied to a life I wasn't a part of anymore. But then I saw a name that made me pause. Ryan, my best friend. The guy who had been my brother before Jason decided to rip that title away. I hesitated. We hadn't talked much lately. Not because of any falling out, just life pulling us in different directions. But if there was anyone who could remind me who the hell I was outside of all this mess, it was him. I pressed call. It rang twice before he picked up. Dude. His voice was groggy, laced with confusion. It's like 6 in the morning. You better be dying. I let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. I might be. Instantly, he was alert. What happened? I sat back on the bed, gripping the phone tighter. Everything. Silence. Then, where are you? I glanced around the dingy motel room, the peeling wallpaper, the dim light barely keeping the darkness at bay. Nowhere, I admitted. Well, Ryan said, voice steady, no questions asked. Let's fix that. By the time I pulled into Ryan's driveway, the sun was already creeping over the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban street. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember the last time I had actually felt something that wasn't rage, betrayal, or exhaustion. Nothing came to mind. Ryan's porch light flicked on. A second later, the front door swung open, and there he was, standing barefoot in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. I barely had the car in park before he was already stepping down onto the driveway. "Jesus, man," he muttered, taking one look at me. "You look like hell." I huffed out a tired laugh. "Feel worse. Get inside." He didn't wait for a response, just turned and walked back in, leaving the door open behind him. I followed, stepping into the familiar space. Ryan's house had always been the exact opposite of my family's place. Warm, cluttered, lived in. Nothing felt staged. There were dishes in the sink, a jacket thrown over the back of the couch, an old guitar leaning against the wall that he probably hadn't touched in months. Felt real. I hadn't realized how much I needed that. He led me into the kitchen, flicked on the coffee maker, then leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "All right," he said. "What the hell happened?" I let out a slow breath. Then, without looking at him, I said, "Emily cheated on me." Silence. Then, in a voice much darker than before, "Who?" My throat tightened. "Jason." More silence. Then, Ryan did the most Ryan thing possible. He grabbed the nearest object, which happened to be an empty coffee mug, and launched it across the kitchen. It shattered against the wall, pieces raining onto the tile. I stared. He flexed his fingers, breathing hard. "Okay," he said, voice tight. "Say that again." I swallowed. "Emily and Jason. For months. She's pregnant. It's his." Ryan ran a hand over his face, shaking his head. "You've got to be kidding me." I laughed bitterly. "Wish I was." He muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like "I will end him," then turned back to me. "And your parents?" I exhaled sharply. "Told me to be the bigger person." His eyes darkened. "Of course they did." Ryan had always known how my family worked. He had been there when Jason got away with everything as kids, when I was always the one told to let it go. He had never liked it, but back then I had just accepted it as normal. "Yeah?" Now I finally saw what he had seen all along. "They want me to forgive him," I said, my voice hollow. Ryan scoffed. "Yeah? And I want a yacht. Guess we're both out of luck." That almost made me smile. Almost. The coffee maker beeped and Ryan poured 2 mugs, sliding one toward me. I took it gratefully, letting the warmth bleed into my fingers. "So," he said after a moment, "what's the plan?" I stared into my coffee. "Don't have one." Ryan nodded slowly. "Okay, then let's make one." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, expression serious. "Listen, man. You can't just sit in a motel forever waiting for the pain to go away. You need to do something. Get the hell out of this mess, build something new. Something that doesn't have them in it." I swallowed. "You make it sound easy." "It's not. But staying is harder." I didn't answer, because I knew he was right. I had spent so much time looking back, so much time drowning in the betrayal, that I hadn't thought about what came next. Maybe it was time to start. I exhaled. "All right," I said. "Let's figure it out." Ryan grinned, clinking his mug against mine. "Now that's more like it." Ryan didn't ask questions. That was the thing about him, he had this rare ability to just get it without needing every ugly detail spelled out. When I told him I was in some nowhere town motel, running from a life that had collapsed under me, he didn't waste time asking why. He just said, "Text me the address. I'll be there." And he was. A 6-hour drive, straight through the night, no complaints. When he finally showed up, his truck kicking up dust in the motel parking lot, I almost laughed. Same old Ryan, messy hair, hoodie over a ratty t-shirt, the kind of guy who looked like he just rolled out of bed but could still talk his way into any club or out of any speeding ticket. I met him outside. He stepped out stretched, then looked me over with a low whistle. "Damn, man. You look like hell." "Feel like it too." Ryan didn't say "I told you so," even though he could have. Back when Emily and I first got together, he had never been her biggest fan. Not because he knew, I mean, how the hell could he have known, but because he always said something about her felt off. Too rehearsed, too polished. Like she was playing a part. I ignored him then. Now, I wished I hadn't. "Come on," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "I know a place." We ended up at a lakeside cabin. Ryan's uncle owned it, some old fishing retreat he barely used, tucked away where no one could find it unless they knew exactly where to look. No traffic, no noise, just trees stretching for miles and water so still it looked like glass. Exactly what I needed. Inside, it was simple, wood-paneled walls, a couch that had seen better days, a fridge stocked with beer and nothing else. Ryan tossed me a bottle the second we stepped in, then kicked back onto the couch like he had lived there his whole life. "So," he said, cracking his drink open. "You gonna tell me what happened, or do I have to guess?" I exhaled sharply, sinking into the chair across from him. "Emily cheated on me." Ryan didn't even blink. "Called it." That made me laugh, but there was no humor in it. "With Jason." His whole body went still. "Your brother Jason?" he repeated slowly like he needed me to confirm what he just heard. I nodded. Ryan stared at me for a long moment. Then, very calmly, he took a sip of his beer, set it down, and said, "All right. We're killing him." I snorted. Tempting. "Nah, I'm serious," he said, leaning forward. "No jury in the world would convict us. We just need an alibi and Ryan." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. No murder. But man, what the hell? Jason? That's insane. Does your family know?" I let out a slow breath. "Oh, they know. They just don't care." That was what hurt the most. Not just losing Emily. Not just losing Jason. But realizing my parents had picked their side and it wasn't mine. Ryan watched me, his expression unreadable. Then he shook his head, muttering, "Damn, man." I nodded. "Yeah." We sat there for a while, drinking in silence, the weight of everything settling between us. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. I stayed at the cabin for a while. Longer than I planned. Longer than I probably should have. Days blurred together in a quiet, thoughtless haze. Mornings spent sitting on the dock, staring out at the still water, letting the cold air bite through my skin like I needed to feel something. Anything. Afternoons chopping wood, fixing things around the place. Mindless, physical work to keep myself from drowning in my own thoughts. Nights sitting by the fire with Ryan, passing a bottle back and forth, talking about everything and nothing at the same time. It was the first time in weeks I had been able to just exist without someone calling, without someone pushing me to forgive, forget, move on. But eventually, the real world started creeping back in. Ryan's life couldn't stop just because mine had. He had a job, responsibilities. And me? I had nothing left tying me to where I came from. No wedding to return to. No family waiting for me. No home that still felt like home. And yet, a part of me still felt stuck. Like I was floating in limbo, refusing to let go of something that had already burned to the ground. I didn't even realize how much I was avoiding reality until Ryan forced me to face it. It happened one night after we had both downed one too many beers. He leaned back in his chair, watching me with that sharp, knowing look of his, the one that meant he was about to call me out on my bullshit. "So," he said, swirling the last of his drink. "What's next?" I frowned. "Next? Yeah. What's the plan? You just gonna live here forever? Become a fisherman? Talk to birds?" I scoffed, tossing a bottle cap at him. "Shut up. I'm serious, man." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You can't stay in hiding forever." I exhaled sharply, running a hand over my face. "I know. Do you?" Ryan tilted his head. "Because from where I'm sitting, it kinda seems like you're just waiting. Like you're hoping someone will swoop in and fix everything for you." That hit harder than I wanted to admit. I stayed quiet. Ryan sighed, shaking his head. "Look, I get it. You got wrecked. I would have put Jason in the damn ground if I were you. But you're at a crossroads now, man. You either let this define you or you get up and start building something new." I let his words settle. Because he was right. I had spent so much time being angry, being hurt, that I hadn't stopped to think about what came next. I had lost everything I thought my future was supposed to be. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Maybe this was a reset. A second chance. A clean slate. For the first time in a long time, I thought about what I wanted. Not what my family expected. Not what Emily wanted. Not what anyone else thought my life should be. Just me. And I realized I didn't have to go back. Not to that city. Not to those people. Not to the life I had built around a lie. I could go anywhere. Do anything. Start fresh. The idea hit me like a breath of cold, crisp air. Freedom. I looked up at Ryan, a slow grin spreading across my face. "I think it's time for something new." He grinned back. "Now that's what I like to hear." And just like that, the weight I had been carrying for weeks, the pain, the betrayal, the anger started to lift. Because I wasn't running anymore. I was moving forward.